desert, you can't remember your name, 'cause there ain't no one for to give you no pain. After 9 days, I let the horse run free, 'cause the desert had turned to sea. There were plants and birds and rocks and things. There was sand and hills and rings. The ocean is a desert with its life underground and a perfect disguise above. Under the cities lies a heart made of brown, but the humans will give no love. You see, I've been through the desert on a horse with no name. It felt good to be out of the rain. In the desert, you can't remember your name, 'cause there ain't no one for to give you no pain.
Darshan Kulkarni, welcome.
Thank you, sir. I'm excited to be here. I get to talk to the guru, the clinical trials guru, in plain English. So I'm excited.
Man, in plain English, like we're working on Spanish with Latinos in clinical research. I jump on a few in Spanish.
Do you speak Spanish?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Claro que sí, más o menos.
Si habla español. That's the only thing I know.
Yeah, man. I mean, I live in a border town now. Like my Spanish levels exponentially skyrocketed. Like since we
Wow.
moved here, I knew it like enough to like get by, but now I could actually have a conversation. Not an intelligent one, I don't think, but still a conversation.
Wait, what does not an intelligent one mean? And the reason I ask is
we can't go in depth, and then
conversational,
and then humor and slang are the toughest parts to master. Once you get those, like you're basically fluent. So I'm not there yet. I'm almost at the humor part, and then some slang.
How many languages do you speak?
English, Spanish, Romanian. I took French in high school, but never paid attention, so doesn't doesn't count. Somehow I got a passing grade. 4 years of high school, and
that's really
can't
good.
really speak French, but yeah.
Je ne comprends pas.
Ah, man. See, I can't really reply back.
I mean, neither. Any response you gave to me would be limited.
But anyways, man, the song
It goes to diversity. Goes to the topic for today.
The topic for today, you commented on a post I put recently about it's nice that pharma says the right stuff.
Yeah.
Especially big pharma. I feel like small biotechs can take more risks. I feel like this is their competitive advantage, maybe. But when the FDA mandates more diversity in trials, which we can argue, like, I mean, they've done it, but have they actually not approved a study with good results yet because of a lack of diversity? That I'm not sure about.
So it's interesting you asked this question. I'm actually in the middle of like writing an article. Hopefully it'll get published soon. I'm talking to some people right now.
Of course, you're the industry's hardest working man.
Says Mr. Dan Sfera. I consider that to be high praise. I'm working on an article on diversity and the history of diversity, and we actually the first thing I was able to find that I looked at that was reasonable was sort of the 1988 guideline for the format and content of clinical and statistical sections of new drug applications, and there they actually asked for demographic information. Mm-hmm. So the point is, demographics became something people cared about starting in the 1980s. And then we've had a few different things like the NIH Revitalization Act of 1993 and FADAMA, which talked about diversity as well. So we've had this idea of we want more diversity, but I think this is the first sort of solid attempt around it, around saying what is required.
Sponsored, right? Because that NIH stuff, I mean, that's more like academic. Who's going to get a grant? Like people like Eli Lilly and Takeda don't care about that.
It was for NIH-funded studies, and that's specific instance.
Right.
Yeah,
but
again, you have to remember it's like the common rule, right? Some of the stuff just sort of translates in and filters down and trickles down into.
It only took 4 decades. It's 2023. You said 80s and 90s. Now it's what 2024. It's gonna be where we're talking about, virtual reality, and we still can't get patients in a study. We still can't get a Spanish language consent form on an iPad.
Yeah, well, we can have a whole discussion about that as well. I'm not sure that's necessarily true, but you need to have the right structures and the right controls in place. But
I wanted to have a higher level discussion because what I posted was, and I just had it before I went live. Big pharma is more risk averse than they are motivated to get diverse patients in their trials. Now the two are going to collide because it's just going to be a matter of time when the FDA reviews a study, a phase 3 study, a big one, and says, hey, these results were great, but unfortunately you were lacking on the diversity, so we can't approve it. That's going to catalyze, this is nice now. A lot of virtue signaling. Oh, yeah. Let's, roast marshmallows by the fire and discuss diversity and quality. But that's going to make real change. And then the whole CT world's trying to say, okay, well, let's get physicians in these communities to share. And my whole strategy is, no, let's get these clinicians to do the studies.
Yeah.
What are you
So I have a few different responses to that. So number one, I agree with Karina that this is a great topic.
Me too. Shout out to Karina. Love Karina.
But what I would start off with is agreeing with you that I think industry is rife. Every 2 years or so, you see a new buzzword, and that new buzzword is what everyone latches onto. Probably about 10 years ago, that buzzword was patient centricity. Then the next buzzword was remote studies. Then it was
remember risk-based. You and I did a whole
there you go. Centralized monitoring, risk-based, decentralized studies, and diversity. I mean, the thing is, in the end, these are all, to me, I think of it more like a diamond, where it's just what facet are you showing? How is diversity not patient-centric? How are you, in the end, you're trying to say that we want all types of patients in these studies. Well, yeah, because your studies should have that. I'm not sure why that's a novel idea. So to me, I'm agreeing with you that I think it's a lot of sort of fancy talk for what should have been happening in the first place. And I think it reminds me of some of the stuff that Brad Hightower has been doing, where he's been showing these nonprofits that pop up. They make a bunch of money, and it's been about a fancy new topic, but the actual crux of it is something that sites have been doing the whole time. And maybe sponsors have been doing the whole time as well. They've just never quite focused on it. It's really making this, we want to consider this and be intentional about what we're doing. And I think that's what the FDA is looking for. Don't make it a byproduct. Don't make it a sideshow. Don't make it I'm surprised that happened. Make it a goal. And that's in line with what the FDA has been doing overall from a regulatory strategy perspective, which is if you define where you're going, if you define your key goals, you're more likely to hit them. So if diversity is a key goal, you're more likely to hit it.
Well, yeah. And like I said, it's only going to take one sponsor for the FDA to say, well, good results, but you know what? Unfortunately, you're lacking on diversity and we can't approve it. Do another phase 3.
So the funny thing was there was a reverse version of this in the past. I'd heard about it. I don't know exactly which study this was, but I'd heard about it where it was like a study done in China or in India or something like that, where there were too many people from that country. And they said that, how is this representative of patients in the US? So you did all these studies with all these patients globally, but tell me it represents the people in the US.
Mm.
And that
So
was harder for me to figure out.
they probably only had like 3 sites in the U.S. and they were AMCs and they didn't enroll
Possibly.
anyone. And yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, we know that. So yes, I agree. There are elements of all this stuff we discussed, DCT, risk-based monitoring, that are here to stay.
Yeah.
But the dirty thing about our industry is there's a bunch of grifters in the way with their hands out for any new topic.
Yeah.
Now it's diversity. Oh, gimme, gimme, gimme. You know, that's like we're gonna
Oh,
get.
I think diversity is not even the hottest one right now. That was so 2 weeks ago.
What's
AI is the hottest one.
Yeah, but AI is gonna be a fundamental like paradigm shift for everything.
To me, I think it's going to be like everything else. It's just another tool.
Right.
AI is going to play a huge role in diversity. It's just. Go ahead. You disagree?
No, I think AI is gonna affect everything it touches eventually.
Wouldn't diversity affect everything we touch as well?
Yeah, but I think diversity is more pragmatic to reach the outcomes now than AI.
How do you mean?
So all you need for diversity, like to increase more patients of a particular minority background into a study, is find sites in those areas where those patients are. Like, and you don't need to leave the U.S. So until I came to Yuma, right? They didn't have a site in Yuma. They're
Was that right?
sponsored. Yeah, the only one here was a hospital. They did oncology studies. Well, now they keep coming back to us, big pharma, because we have Hispanic. They're like, wait a minute, research naive and Hispanic, and someone actually took the time to train PIs how to do it, and now they have an infrastructure. Okay, now it makes sense. Like, of course, we need a site there,
Right.
but it didn't make sense 3 years ago. So we just got to empower these communities, and the DCT answer to this as well. Let's make these clinics referring sites, and then let's make a central site with a central PI. And yes, that is a strategy. I just don't. I see how that road ends, and it doesn't end with that referring site actually doing anything, because I know how busy these sites are.
I'm curious from practical level what you think about that, because I've been with sites that have done the whole central PI versus referring sites PI. That's not contemplated in the regulations as I see it. And I'm wrong about this because there are a lot of people who think that it is, but
the new guidance though does allow.
You're talking from the DCT perspective, okay?
Yeah, because I think DCT and diversity kind of meet here at this.
Okay.
Topic.
See, I was thinking about it more from in the end, there is just one PI. So referring sites is not, to me, when you say the word referring sites, I think of that as there's a PI at each site, and then there's a central PI. You can't have multiple PIs. That's not what a PI is.
Right.
You can have an attending who's referring to a PI, and that's fine, and that would be consistent with the DCT guidance. But you aren't going to have 2 PIs.
Right. No. I'm going even more practical. Like just the way we do research now.
Yeah.
Just instead of having 100 sites in Miami,
right?
Have maybe 20 in Miami, and then include some areas of the country where there are representation of diversity, whether it's African Americans. Shout out to Brad for going to Arkansas. He's going to have like 100% African American enrollment in some of his studies.
I would
take like Yuma, places like El Paso, places like Rio Grande, like that you can do it. It's just the big pharma is risk averse, because if you tell them now, they'll say, well, yeah, but we need the experience of the PI. So it's something to consider. But for the study now, it's not going to work. Well, it's not going to work because you need an entrepreneur to go out there and make it happen. And struggle with the crappy studies for the first year like I did. Until now, all of a sudden, oh, yeah, well, you have experienced PIs now. Well, yeah, we struggled through like some crappy studies to get there. But yeah.
Yeah. What I begin to question is, I would go one step even more practical in that. I'm wondering if we would go, I think I can see 2 models that are emerging. one model is possibly going to be, and I've sort of struggled with this the whole time, which is this idea of what role will pharmacies play. And I say this as a pharmacist, just to be clear again, Dan, as usual, not giving legal advice, not giving clinical advice.
I gotta pump up Darshan real quick as a sidebar. So I'll be an attorney. Sidebar real quick. Darshan is an attorney and a pharmacist licensed, and there's only like a dozen people like him in the world. If you talk about research experience, like maybe one of one. This is a one of one rare. This is a rare NFT. Like if you can get Darshan, it's rare.
That's not useful. To be an NFT right now is hugely problematic.
Give it 10 years. But this is not legal advice and not medical advice.
Right, thank you.
Sorry, I should have started with that. But the horse with no name in the desert,
that's pretty
the
good.
The ocean is just a desert with fish underneath.
Wait, what now?
That song, the intro song, Brad Hightower inspired.
Yeah, but there's no fish underneath in that song.
Yeah, he said it in the third verse. It's one of my favorite songs. The ocean is a desert with the fish underneath. He's saying that basically a desert and an ocean couldn't be like further from each other, but they're actually the same thing. They're both like when you're in the middle of the ocean, you're out in the wilderness. When you're out in the middle of the desert, it's the same concept. It's just you don't think about desert and ocean. The guy was stoned out of his mind when he wrote that song, but it makes a lot of sense.
Sure, let's go with that.
Shout out to Brad Hightower.
Shout out to Brad Hightower. So I think the point I was making. Actually, I forget the point I was making.
Yeah, the marijuana tends to do that when you like disrupt the conversation with a marijuana sidebar. But you said there's something even more practical.
So we're talking about the types of sort of decentralized research and how that might play into diversity. I think one will probably end up becoming as pharmacies become more mainstream as part of the research sites. I think one of the things we might start seeing is you might still have, say, a small research site, say one in Yuma, for argument's sake. But that one, the PI there suddenly is managing patients who are not only in Yuma, but patients who are all over the state of Arizona, where there isn't another PI that they can go to. Mm-hmm. So that and the pharmacy ends up being the place where the medication is stored. So that would be quite consistent with the DCT guidance.
Could be, or the pharmacy.
Yeah.
Or the pharmacy. Yeah, good point. Or the pharmacy is the place where patients from outside of the PI's practice are, right?
But they still need a PI. So either that pharmacy becomes the place where you're going to do the, what's the word I'm looking for?
Recruiting?
The recruiting, which is one of the strategies people are talking about. But I think that's for me personally, I think pharmacies doing the recruiting is a harder strategy. But I mean, I'm sure people have thought through this. I think pharmacies being the place where you can sort of put up posters, maybe there's an angle there. The filtering from saying that here's a study to are you qualified for the study is harder, especially with pharmacists right now. I don't know if you guys have been following the big shortage of pharmacists, but pharmacists are saying we don't want to work because you're just putting too much on us. You're expecting one person to do something that when I was working as a pharmacist, it took 3-4 people to do.
And now we're just expecting honestly, they don't get paid that much, pharmacists. Like,
I'm not going to go down that path. We got paid pretty well as pharmacists, to be quite honest.
But that was back in the day, not anymore.
Back in the day. No, but it's compared to the average income, pharmacists get paid pretty well. But it doesn't matter what you get paid at a certain point, right? Yeah. At a certain point, if you can't do your job properly and you're going to end up hurting someone, you'd rather not do your job.
But here's my point, and then shout out to my sponsor, Inato. They're actually they help sites, and they actually front and center is diversity in their questionnaires, and this is why they keep growing in business for the sponsor. Absolutely free for sites to use. I have a study, so I'm going back to the small biotechs will innovate in this space, in this little vertical, faster than the big pharma, and then the big pharma will see that it's okay, that the FDA didn't kill them, and then they will adopt it too. So when I first moved out to Yuma, the only studies I got were from sponsors I never heard of. It wasn't Eli Lilly. It wasn't Takeda. It was these small sponsors you don't even want to work with necessarily most of the time. because
Right.
they want to they're willing to take the risk. That's their competitive advantage. Now, what we're seeing with DCT elements is these small biotechs are designing their studies just like you said. We have a study at our site in Yuma, but we can take patients from basically all of like the western Arizona.
Right.
So from Havasu all the way down, like 3-hour drive. We actually have a patient who did this.
Right.
They designed their study to where they only need to come in like twice for the whole
Right.
study, like physically come in. But we
Yeah.
store the IP, but we give the IP to them for the whole study.
Right.
And then
Right.
the rest of the visits are virtual. And
Correct.
I think that's one way to get diversity. The ironic thing is, in the example I'm talking about, the patient was Caucasian. So,
It doesn't
but
matter.
right, the proof of concept's there. Like it's
Right.
being done already, but it's being done by the smaller biotechs. So these smaller biotechs are the ones taking a chance because they have no choice.
I'll say a few different things to that. So, number one, I'm trying to make notes as I go along with this. So, number one, my experience tends to be the people. Kevin probably has just put up a comment, so you want to put that up.
Melvin, my
Collaborating
man.
with historically Black colleges can help boost diversity. 100%, 100% that they can. But the problem with that is it's never been difficult trying to collaborate with historically Black colleges. The issue has been that people have been reticent to do it, have not been eager to do it, and that's the problem we need to fix. The problem
Yeah.
is not accessing those patients in historically Black colleges.
Mhm.
It's sort of people talk about this concept of food deserts. Have you heard that term before?
No, but it's a great topic considering the song.
You're really into the song. But people talk about food deserts, and food deserts are basically places where you can't get a nutritious meal. In the same way, there are health deserts, and the idea is that in many situations you will have you'll have people who need the help, people who want to participate in clinical trials, people who want healthcare access, and there's just simply not enough out there. And I think decentralized studies will enable access to those patients. And I think that's the advantage we're looking at.
It does, but you still need an intermediary to get those patients
Without a doubt.
aware, and this is where the 1N healths of the world come in. Like Huma said, hey Huma, nice to meet you. Speaking, this is exactly Huma. We need to do a podcast, by the way. Right? I just met her this weekend in Dallas.
Okay.
And we never got a chance to do a podcast. Huma, let's do the podcast, okay? Like message me on LinkedIn. Let's do it. If you have time today, I work from home all day. Let's get it done. Huma's an amazing person. Everybody needs to connect. She's a dermatologist, actually, and she's works at a site in Canada. So it's not a matter of diversity in clinicians, but it's about community engagement and education about trials. Marginalized communities have a lot of reservations about study drugs. Exactly, Huma. We talked about this a little bit. Let me bring up the meeting we were just at, Darshan.
Okay.
I know it's anecdotal, and you attorneys don't like that, but who cares? Look, what Kelvin just said. Collaborating with historically Black colleges can help boost diversity in clinical research and its workforce. Why is the workforce important? Because I believe you're not going to get diversity of patients if you don't have a diversity of the workforce. It just makes it a lot easier.
I agree with you 100%, but I think you've got to create the environment for this, because what you don't want is a scenario where the workforce feels like they're enabling diversity and they're still betraying the people that they are helping serve. So you've got to enable them to actually truly be enabling diversity. So it's not about we have 4 Black CRCs on staff.
Right.
Well, great. But what is it that you're doing so that they can actually reach out to their patients?
Yes. Are they empowered?
Exactly.
Are those coordinators empowered? Yes, I can't wait to interview Grecia, my new coordinator, on this, because as soon as she got hired, literally 3 weeks in, we started getting more Hispanic patients. I said, how did we make this work? Oh, well, I posted on Facebook that we do studies, and all these people messaged me. No surprise, they're all Latino, all of them. But let me tell you, this meeting I was just at with Huma, right? Big investigator meeting. big pharma, like 400 people. Do you know, Darshan, how many? I was just looking around, bored. You're in these meetings all day, so I'm in the back. Look, I like to sit in the back. I'm in the back looking at everyone. Do you know how many African Americans I saw sitting in the crowd?
No.
2.
Okay.
2.
What were the rest though? What was the other breakdown?
Caucasian,
Mm-hmm.
Middle Eastern, Asian, some Hispanic. There weren't
Give
that
me a
many.
little bit of a breakdown though. I mean, you're giving
Oh,
me
it was like 80% Caucasian
okay.
and the rest other. And from other, there was like 2 African Americans
Mm-hmm.
that I saw. And I was there the whole day. Like I saw
Right.
everyone that walked in, I saw. Like there were some African Americans on stage
Sure.
because the big pharma brought like a patient advocate and they happened to be African American. Let
Right.
Huma, you put in the answers. What was the breakdown? Ethnic breakdown. Huma, she's a doctor, she's more analytical. You put down the percentages. Tell Darshan I'm not lying, man. Tell Darshan I'm not lying. So, but here's the point. The hypocrisy is like we're this big pharma. We got like a panel. They did like this fake podcast where they had like a person they paid to host the panel.
Yeah.
And then they had a patient advocate
Yeah.
that clearly does this for a living. Went on stage. She was African American. She
Sure.
talked about her experiences as a patient and all this.
Yeah.
And then they had like another doctor. He was African American. He wasn't part of the study, but he was a PI at a big AMC. And then you
Sure.
had 2 other physicians or PhDs. I don't know. So they're up there talking about diversity. But in the crowd, that the sponsor, I'm not gonna, it's hard to like shut them out. I like the sponsor. They paid for those people to be up there. But they also handpicked every site in the crowd.
So was this for a trial or was
This
this
is for a trial.
This is for an individual trial. Okay.
So my point is, like, they're virtue signaling the right message, but
Right.
their actions, and maybe it's the site. They're gonna say, "Well, sponsor's not in charge of hiring staff at the sites." Well, why aren't there more sites than in places like Mississippi or Arkansas or places like that? And Humus, just so somebody co-signs what I say, you are not lying.
We're gonna need more than you're not lying, Dan.
Yeah, Huma, Darshan's an attorney. Like he's ready to like throw something at me right now. But seriously, like the point is still made. Like there's just not diversity at the sites.
Yeah.
And
So-
and they're
let's
the ones
explore
picking
what
the
that means.
sites.
So I think that there's different types of diversity, right? I think one of the big things I talk about around diversity is we always sort of go back to, oh, we want diversity. No one talks about diversity of what? Are we talking about just race? Are we talking about sex? Are we talking about sexual orientation? Are we
Right
talking
now, just race. Let's make it simple.
what? Why?
Because
What about vets?
we gotta start with something. I think that's the easiest thing to start with. They already
I'm
do
curious
the
if your
diversity
audience agrees.
of sex. They do the diversity of sex. They have a cap. When we reach this number of females, we're only going to allow males. They even brought it up on a slide, and the IRT will lock, and you can only enroll males.
So we've got 2 done. So there's a hierarchy of diversity that we need to consider.
Yeah, like Huma's with me. Ethnicity at this point. Darshan, why discuss all this other stuff with the, I know like gender fluidity and all that's important, but let's talk about just ethnicity at this point. It's
How
the
about vets,
easiest
though?
thing. How about what?
Vets.
Veterans?
Yeah. Should we
Sure.
have more veterans in studies? How do you make sure that we're giving those guys or handicapped?
Sure, disabled, but the FDA didn't say we need more vets or
And that's my
disabled in
point.
studies. We need more.
They said
we need the
diversity.
yeah, they said diversity. We need the patients to look. We need the
Yeah.
participants to
Uh-huh.
look like the people taking the drug when it's approved.
Yeah, and I'm not disagreeing with that statement.
Right.
But my point becomes, when you use the term diversity, you create this automatic hierarchy of what diversity is important.
Yeah, but you attorneys are really good at this stuff. Everybody and their mama knows what we mean and what the FDA means.
And that's the point. We're sort of playing codes, aren't we? We're now saying, Kevin, for example, you don't want to touch clinical trials in the VA.
Huma says I would go for prisoner. IRBs would shut you down in a heartbeat.
Actually, that's not true.
No?
We do see studies involving prisoners.
But just for prisons. Like
not just for, but they can be
Okay.
part of the studies.
Okay.
But there have been, I teach bioethics. I used to teach bioethics. I haven't taught that in probably about 2 years. But one of the big
Temple, right?
questions
Temple.
at University of the Sciences,
Oh.
in the biomedical writing program. But one of the big questions used to be, what if you gave, say, 6 months off for every patient who participated in a clinical trial? Is that coercive?
Of course. And but every prisoner would do it.
And that's the question. So my point is, again, the point I was making, we sort of went off track talking about prisoners, but the point I was making was, we talk about diversity, but what we're talking about in code for is we're talking about race diversity.
Of course.
And you say, of course, IRB, Uma's going, you can't go against it.
This is Uma's topic. Like, Uma, we gotta do a podcast today. I hope you're available.
You will be available once.
I do say, of course, because everybody knows that's what we need.
But I think that's my point. I think so. We've got to wait another 40 years before we start talking about vets, and we start talking about what do you call it? Handicapped people.
Probably, to be honest with you.
And I think that's the problem.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the 80-20 rule, like, you want diversity, what's the lowest hanging fruit? It's getting more minorities to participate in studies.
Okay, so we're now playing the 80-20 rule is what I'm hearing. Okay,
that's the way I look at it.
Okay, hold on. Beautiful.
Like
you set me up beautifully. You set me up beautifully. So
that's
let me play this out.
Guys, by the way.
So what you just said is the 80-20 rule. So if the 80-20 rule applies and we only care about like large volumes of diversity, right, where you can see the biggest impact, what you're now saying is that Asians don't need to be worried about diversity anymore because the representative population is like 2% in the country.
No, what I'm saying
we were still playing 80-20, weren't we?
We're playing 80-20 of the problem, meaning there's all these minority groups, disabled, LGBTQ.
Hi, Dina.
More of the letters after it. There's all these minority groups, but the lowest hanging fruit is ethnicity. So diversity. So let's say ethnicity. So that includes Asians, Pacific Islanders.
No. I'm agreeing with you. I'm agreeing with you. So we're saying we're going to do ethnicity. So let's stick with ethnicity. I'm not going down the other paths.
Mm-hmm.
Have we achieved diversity if we get only more of a black population in there? We have not affected any other populations.
We made progress.
Is that the only standard we use then?
No, but we've made progress compared to current. That's an improvement, and then we can make improvement for.
So when do we know when we've made enough improvement to look at the next one?
I guess when the FDA says, "Good job, sponsor," like your drug's approved.
No. I'm still talking ethnicity. What percentage do black individuals need to be in the study before we go? Okay, Hispanics, you're up next, and then Hispanics, you're done. Asians, you got next. Native Americans, you got next. Yeah, what exactly are we talking about here?
From like a logical point of view, and I hope the way the FDA looks at it, I think they have, based on the statements they made, they want the patient population in the studies to match as close to 1-to-1 as the ethnic breakdown in the U.S.
Kevin, hold on. Let's pull up Kevin's comment. When you get 10% of blacks, that's his comment. Okay, so we're just gonna, and we'll play this out. So we're saying that we now have a percentage-based system that we keep having to go down. So
what Kevin just said, numbers need to be representative of the U.S. population. So if
okay.
there's 8% Asians in the U.S.,
So we're going to go down a hierarchy pathway.
basically,
and until you hit that number, you don't get to move on. So we're playing what is it? Is it Go? I forget which game that was. It's like Monopoly. Like Monopoly. Where you haven't hit you haven't hit Go. Do not collect $200.
Right. But you're talking about as if we're gonna achieve this anytime soon. Like that's not gonna be. That'll be a good problem to have when we get enough African Americans. It's time to let's focus on Asians now. Like that's to me that's progress.
To me, it says I think I'm going back to Kevin's comment, which is enhanced diversity of vulnerable populations. I think that's the angle you aim for. But the question then is, what is a vulnerable population?
Yeah.
And is a vulnerable population only based on ethnicity? So it goes back to the original question.
Let me do vulnerable population definition by Oxford.
Are you just literally Googling this?
Yeah, Columbia School of Nursing. Individuals who experience greater risk factors for poor health outcomes due to their racial or ethnic status or sexual preferences. Also vulnerable are children, the elderly, socioeconomically disadvantaged.
So let's play this out. Let me play this out. So here's what I'm hearing now. I'm now going to do a digital campaign because Uma just mentioned a digital campaign. Can I now start doing a digital campaign that only targets Black individuals until we get to that 10% number that Kevin mentioned a few minutes ago? Because you've got to spend your dollars somewhere.
You can, yeah.
So you wouldn't spend it on.
That would be happy to help you with this.
Oh, I know.
I would say yes.
So you wouldn't spend it across the board. You would spend it. Interesting.
Here's why.
Okay.
Every site. I'm in Yuma. We have there's maybe like 8% African American population in our community. Maybe.
Sure.
It's probably 60 Caucasian, like 40 Hispanic, and then 20 other. So if I'm given that budget as a site, this is back to my initial point.
Yeah.
I should be able to use that money as I see fit for what is most likely to achieve like the outcomes the sponsor wants at my site. I'm not going to be able to enroll unlimited African American or Asians in my community. So that ad would make no sense for my community.
So what happens?
Ad would make sense in Philly. In Philly, go crazy with everything you can. In Philly, in these bigger cities, you can actually throw the money across the board and say, hey, you know what? We have this ad for targeting African Americans. We have this ad targeting Hispanics. We have Asians.
But you're thinking at a site level. You're not thinking at a sponsor level.
I don't think sponsors should get involved.
That's exactly what the law is saying. The sponsors have to make a diversity plan.
They can make the plan that empowers the sites. And this is exactly what I'm saying. The big pharma, this is like how they want to empower their sites. No. We got to get 10 communities to prove this. The small biotechs are saying go for it. Like, this is why we hired you.
You know why small biotechs say that, by the way?
They have no plan. They have no plan.
Exactly.
I know, but that's better. That's better outcomes, man.
But we don't know their better outcomes. You're literally telling me chaos is what reigns.
But the big pharma don't even discover drugs anymore. They just buy the ones that are promising.
Sure. I mean, within reason, but sure, let's go with that assumption for the most part, right? Let's assume for the most part, large pharma buys small pharma.
It's no longer lucrative to discover.
I'm not disagreeing with you.
Yeah.
That's why I wasn't disagreeing with you. I was like, for the most part, you're right. But my point being, what you're really getting. So I'll give you two different responses to that. The first response is what you're admitting is Yuma and Huma go so well together.
I like
what you're admitting is number one that small biotechs, and again I work with small biotechs all the time, and I work with small sites all the time. But for the most part they have no plan because they're new. That's the whole point. They don't know what they don't know. They're hoping the CRO guides them. That's the first part.
Strategy. That's a bad move, by the way.
Happens all the time. But here's the other part of this whole thing. The other part is I'm now involved doing a bunch of M&A transactions. And when you're buying these companies, excuse my language, but it's a total shit show of what you're buying. You're going, who came up with this and why did you come up with it? And usually they'll sort of fumble their way through an answer. And in many cases, it doesn't matter because you're going to buy them anyways. You're going to try to fix the problem because overall their product is a good one. But the idea is, how do you do it in a way that really targets diversity? And what does diversity mean? I mean, we can have a whole conversation on compliance. We can have a whole conversation on fraud pod. We can have a whole conversation on just all these different pieces. And depending on what you look at, you're going to find different issues that these companies will have. But let's focus on the issue of diversity. And the issue of diversity, you just mentioned, you will start by spending all your money in Yuma. There we go. In Yuma.
Confused with Uma.
With Uma, exactly. It's like, wait, which one are we at right now? But you just admitted you will spend all your money to get a percentage of the African American population. I don't have a problem with targeting the African American population. But what you just
Native Americans is what I would use because that's most likely who's going to join my studies here.
Okay.
And Brad, when he opens his site in Arkansas, I don't even know if it's public. My bad, Brad. He's going to do it for African Americans because that's who's most likely to join his studies in that community. So we can argue what diversity is.
Right.
But we can't argue what it isn't. And what it isn't is what me and Uma both saw with our own eyes over there at that meeting.
So wait, those are two separate conversations. One is who is finding the diverse population?
Right.
And what is the diverse population?
Right. We can skip that last one.
So
we can skip that last one. Throw it out. Because you want to increase diversity. It doesn't matter if you get more Hispanics, more Asians, more.
I would disagree with you. I disagree with you. Because what you just admitted to me earlier was this idea that I will only look for a certain type of diverse population if the goal was represent the entire U.S. population.
Right. Because
and you aren't going to find anyone who meets a certain goal. This was actually literally. Let me finish this thought.
Yeah, go ahead.
This is literally what the U.S. Supreme Court said is a problem.
Yeah.
The U.S. Supreme Court said that if you are trying to what's the word I'm looking for? If you are in the case of admissions, they said you can't just go, oh, we've got two different individuals, and the only thing they differ in is race. You can't just pick one based on race. You've got to have a bigger funnel top and put as many more people into that funnel top, and then let whatever happens filter through. What you're saying is, I'm just going to pick based on whatever I think is the easiest thing to do, which is I'll target the population I want. Question is, if we continue to do that as an industry, will this get toppled over by, will diversity requirements themselves get thrown out before they even have a chance to mature in light of the Supreme Court decision?
So there's two strategies to go at that. So comparing like Yuma clinical trials to Harvard is not correct because we're in a community that is mostly Hispanic and Native American and some Caucasian. So there's not really diversity here. So when I say I'm targeting...
Wait, you just mentioned diversity. How is it not diverse? I'm confused with that statement.
There's no diversity in the sense that there's not like a multitude of different ethnic backgrounds for us to choose from, like Harvard struggles with.
But you did mention three different audiences, right? Hispanic,
we'll enroll
African American, Native American.
We'll enroll all, right?
Exactly.
It's mostly in my site. It's mostly Hispanic, Caucasian, and Native Americans.
Sure.
And then the rest is like everyone else. And of course, when there's African American that wants to come through, we're like, yeah, this is awesome. Like, we need more diversity.
Absolutely.
But unlike Harvard, we're not getting like referrals from all over the place with all kinds of ethnic background where they actually have to decide. This is like, we're in a community. We have to enroll patients from our community. Right. So the way I see, like, your question is really, how do the sites deal with it, and how do the sponsors strategically select sites across the country or across the world? But let's keep it country for simplicity's sake for their study. And I believe sponsors dropping the ball by not investing in sites in underserved areas in the United States.
But so I'm agreeing with you that they should be investing in sites in underserved communities, and and I would argue, and I agree with Kevin, for example, when he talks about, you know what, go after historically black colleges, target them. I'd worry a little bit about just the idea of targeting. To me, that screams a little more Tuskegee than I'm comfortable with, just sort of off the top of my head. But let's assume that they have the appropriate controls in place.
Mm-hmm.
So we go down that path, and you've got the Yuma site that has more of a Hispanic population and maybe some of the Native American population in there as well.
Mm-hmm.
And then you find Edison, New Jersey, where you're going to get all the freaking Indians you can possibly handle. But my point being, that is what that diversity plan that the sponsors are going to be doing will address. Now, if you go in there, Dan, and you start saying, I'm going to take all of my budget and target it towards the African American population, what you might land up doing is skewing the entire results away from what had been part of that overall diversity plan because of what you were doing. So you didn't go after your natural population. What you went for is this other population that you, in your, again, with good intention, you try to get all these other people.
What about a clinic in Southside Chicago? I mean, you don't even need to target African Americans.
Right, exactly.
You just put an ad out. Hey, we got a study. Yeah. You're going to get almost 100% African Americans. But where's the clinic? Where's the clinic in Southside Chicago? I didn't see any of their coordinators at this meeting.
I have no comment. Like, I would argue that they should have been, right? Well, I guess within the
say so too. But why are they not? Because the sponsors, they have sales reps that go into every community.
Yeah.
It's just an extra pitch. Hey, you know what? This whole thing about research. There's some sponsors I can't give a shout out because it's very early. I signed a CDA. They're working on exactly this. How do we train clinicians and community clinics in these areas to start doing research? And me and the LICR people might be busy for a long time, by the way.
I would go one step further. I think one of the big things you need to solve, and this is like preaching to the converted, if you will, but I think what you need to start off with is, if we can just get, I like Kevin's comments. He's got some good comments in there, but if we can just get, sorry, I forgot where I was going with the conversation.
This is a lively convo.
Well, that's exactly the goal.
This is a better convo than they had at the investigator meeting, by the way, because it's real things. It's not just talking about feelings or what everyone agrees is the right thing, right? Oh, more diversity in trial. Yeah, of course. Treat your patients properly. Yeah, talk to them like a human, of course. I mean,
what I was talking about was training. What I was talking about is one of the reasons, and this is going back to the point you were making, Dan, where you were talking about this idea that we need, and again, I think Kevin was talking about this as well. How do you get a diverse workforce that can connect with your diverse audience? And I think part of the problem we have is that every sponsor comes in and says, oh, we're going to do training on GCPs, for example. And at some point, you've done all the GCP training you can possibly do. If someone can just come in and just go, here's the standard GCP training everyone does. And FDA put out a thing, I think, last week on GCP training. If everyone just says, as long as you do this FDA training, we will consider you GCP trained. Now let's move on to the study-specific training. And I think that is a limitation for all PIs, all sub-Is, all staff at the site. It cuts out what is repetitive work. But I think if you can start addressing that problem, you're going to get more PIs who want to be part of this, more staff who want to be part of clinical research. And I think that's how you start targeting, eliminate some of the barriers to participating in clinical research.
Well, I think like SIP, Shared Investigator Portal,
made
attempts at doing that. They share the GCP from the sites. I think that's the tip of the iceberg.
But the issue is not whether it's available. Everyone has a bunch of stuff available. The reason I picked the FDA one is because it's coming from the FDA. So no one can argue it's inadequate.
Fair enough. I mean, GCP is just the beginning, though. Like that's day one of CRC
Sure.
CRA Academy. Just get this up. I literally tell students this: do this GCP training, just get it over with.
Yeah.
All right. It just teaches you like the overview of what's important. We're gonna get into the nitty gritty in the next 3 months. So just get this out of the way.
Yeah.
It's no good. Like it's of no practical use. It's good from a regulatory perspective because it checks the box.
Yeah.
But from a practical use, it's not good. It just tells you not to harm patients. Like,
well, it depends on what you're training.
Everybody already knows that.
So it's funny you say that because it's not as simple as that. So I do a 2-hour talk on research misconduct.
Yeah.
And the 2-hour talk is still not hitting in the right places because October 4th. So I guess it's been a month at this point.
Almost. Wow.
Yeah. ORI, the Office of Research Integrity, came out and said, we apparently need to fix what is happening around research integrity. And they're trying to change the definitions. And that's going to have a dramatic impact on who can participate as sort of staff. They were primarily, I think you're seeing a large impact in large academic institutions, but it's going to flow down to sites themselves. And
even more reason to want to invest in the underserved communities then. The status quo is let's use the same sites over and over again for all these trials.
Yeah.
Well, if let's say whatever percentage you want, 10% of them are questionable according to ORI standards.
Yeah.
Right? Or maybe it's higher. Maybe it's 20. Well,
sure.
Bye-bye. And then bring in like 20% new sites from different parts of the country that are more diverse.
That's happening naturally anyways. I mean, it's only 3% of physicians, or it's a constant turnover of PIs. So
right, but the ones that like become stable are recycled over and over again. I mean, this is why sites get acquired. This is why they won't look at acquire. They, being the venture capital, won't look to acquire until the site hits certain metrics where they're considered stable, like part of the infrastructure now. Right?
Yeah.
It's usually $1 million EBITDA.
Is that right? Yeah. Is that the number?
Yeah, it's about $1 million EBITDA yearly revenue that you're considered like part of this ecosystem now. Like no matter what kind of market, you'll still get studies. Your PIs and staff have been vetted. So you always need new sites.
Now here's a comment Kevin made. Now I don't know if that's a supported comment.
On it, man. We need
right?
to do something.
If you have a diverse workforce, you make less mistakes. I don't know if that's true. Based on what?
Yeah, I don't know if that's true either. I'm sure Calvin meant something by that.
Yeah, there must be more to that comment. And maybe he's even right, but there's more of a context that we're missing.
Make less mistakes, create value prop for org's bottom line. I think mistakes are mistakes no matter.
Right. It's not like
the diversity.
Right.
We have a mistake. I have to write a CAPA plan later today for a mistake we made as a site. But I mean, those happen regardless.
So here's a question. The question is, if you start doing diversity plans and you don't hit it, do you do
Inato does them. Inato does it. They do. Inato does it. Front and center.
You're really good at the whole sort of marketing for other people thing. So good for you.
I mean, I love them. I love these guys. They put the diversity. Yes, sponsors hold them to it, to their numbers, and Inato will hold the site to it. It's a free service for sites, but if you put that you're going to enroll 20% African Americans and you only put like 10, I mean, yeah, that's a good thing. But Inato on your next study will say, well, your last one, you only did 10. Are you sure you want to keep saying 20? And so yeah, they're developing their plan. Shout out to Dina.
Shout out to Dina. Do you know Dina?
No.
Dina's awesome. Dina's
really?
Awesome.
Okay.
Yeah. Kevin is based on creating a collaborative. I mean, I think you can create a collaborative environment.
Collaborative environment, establishing trust. Look, I know what I saw, and I know what I continue to see.
Yeah.
And if I go to an investigator meeting anytime in the near future, which I don't think I will, I wanted to go once in a while just to see what's new. Sad thing is, man, Same old thing. Maybe the tech is a little bit different. Like there's more DCT elements. There's a vendor for this, a vendor for that. DCT. They're like little improvements are cool. Like they have this e-consent where they have like multimedia embedded into the consent. I thought that was awesome. That's an element of DCT that I usually bash on that I think is amazing. But when it comes to this topic of diversity, I don't think we're going to get anywhere with seeing the representation in the workforce that I saw at that meeting.
So, do you think the biggest problem, the biggest hurdle to diversity is the lack of diversity in patient populations, subject populations, is lack of diversity in the workforce?
In the workforce and in the representation of the clinics and the communities that are underserved. So for the underserved, they usually do like inner city, right? Like AMCs are usually in the middle of the cities.
Sure.
So they're supposed to check that box, but they don't really do that. Everybody knows they don't really, like, they're not getting the job done.
Why do you say that, though? What makes you think that?
Because we wouldn't have this problem otherwise. That's the status quo. The
No, you
status
could-
quo is like using the same AMCs and key opinion leaders over and over again.
I'm not sure I agree with that statement. So I think it depends on the AMCs are often used because they have access to patient populations, and they're often used because they have access to the right investigators. So to me, this idea that, and again, the investigators to me are often chosen because they're right for a specific disease state. So
Exactly.
so to me, I'm unsure whether being in a situation where you choose the same. I don't know why you would land up choosing the same PI, because I would imagine that each study is different.
Same AMC, same institution.
Okay, so
If they were getting the job done, we wouldn't have like a need for small sites. The last thing these sponsors want to do is deal with all these fragmented clinics all over the place. They'd rather have everything centralized. Let's do with UCSF for San Francisco, UCLA for LA.
Sure.
You know, they don't want to deal with people like Yuma Clinical Trials and, you know, the long tail. I mean, it's inefficient for them to deal with all of us. They'd rather just have their hubs. That was part of the virtual trial argument. Let's have these hubs
Yeah.
in different areas. It didn't work. The AMC model didn't work either. That's why private industry.
But that's like saying the SMO
exploded.
model doesn't work. I think we try it every 5 years. They just someone comes up with if we'd done this one thing, everything would have worked.
Exactly. But
So
why didn't it work then? Why didn't you do that one thing?
well,
So-
we didn't have the technology at that time, or we didn't have the data at that time, or I wasn't there to fix the problem.
Right. It's always something.
Right,
It's always
exactly.
something. But it's the same thing. You need more. You need new. You need research naive, in my opinion, research naive investigators.
Yeah.
That don't have recycled patients in their studies. You need diverse background. This is, to me, the solution's simple. Now, implementing it's complicated because at the sponsor level it is. Yeah, Keisha, I'll have to do a CAPA.
Yeah.
Kelvin says patient attribution impacts the bottom line. Look,
Attribution in
I
what
can't
way?
wait. I can't wait to see the first sponsor that said, "Hey, here's our good results." FDA and FDA said, "Well, you know."
But Dan, I think you're fundamentally misunderstanding how these studies get designed. You don't go to the FDA after you've done the study and go, "What do you think?" You're usually
No, but
making
you submit your results to
yeah,
the
but you start off by having a bunch of meetings with the FDA
Of
before
course,
you do that.
of course. And the
So
FDA's gonna say,
hopefully,
"Well, we want representation
yeah,
too." And sponsors say, "All right, well, we got the right sites. They're AMCs. They should do that." Okay, good,
right,
good, good. And
right.
then when the results come out, well, what was what was the ethnic breakdown? It's not what we would hope.
Well, I think there's only a certain amount of stuff you can do as a sponsor, right? Because you can't also exclude patients because of their race.
But they are because of gender.
And that's the question you've got to start
We might
balancing.
need an attorney for that one. If we hit a enrollment they had for one of the studies, this is the second study now.
Yeah.
Once we hit X percentage of females, IRT will be locked. You cannot enroll another female. I wonder if you tell that female participant at your site, hey, we can't enroll you because you're female. If she's
I wouldn't
got a
go.
lawsuit.
I'm not touching that question right now because I don't know enough about that specific situation.
You gotta go research that one, man.
I got to research that one if that
That's
came
gonna
down to
come.
it.
That's coming. It's not
That is
coming at
coming.
our site because we'll get her in another study. We'll tell her, hey, look, this is what they want. It's not us. We want to enroll you.
Yeah.
Let's put you in this study here.
Right. But I don't know. I feel
coming.
like
It's coming.
yeah. Question is what happens then? And also because I think in the case of in all situations, the sponsor doesn't actually know who's in the study. So which is why I think you're going towards diversity plans and not diversity requirements. Because I don't think sponsors, at least right now, are enabled to kind of go, once you hit 10% African American people, no more African Americans.
No, but it would never be that. It would be the more likely scenario would be we've hit enough Caucasians, no more Caucasians.
It really depends on where you're doing the study.
Nah.
You do it at Penn, I can tell you that's not going to be.
They do these things study wide in the IRT, like across the board. They do this study wide in the IRT across the board.
I know what you mean. I'm just saying, again, you can always position your study in different ways. So if you do your study at historically by colleges, do it in West Philadelphia. I say that because I live in Philly, so I just
Sixers,
to be clear.
Go Sixers.
Dan, you know better than to talk to me about sports. You really know better about this. Just to be clear, Dan and I have been doing this since 2009 or so, and
yeah, Darshan didn't know who Allen Iverson was.
No. I didn't know who Allen Iverson was.
Okay.
Here's the situation. You were telling me something, and you were like, "Let me tell you about sports." I was like, you have no idea what I'm talking about, dude.
Wait, do you know who Bryce Harper is?
No.
Phillies.
Is he really? Okay.
Phillies are? Okay.
Unfortunately, my girlfriend's having a great time right there watching and laughing at how little I know. So this is not helpful.
Fair enough, man. There's stuff I know very little on also. But no, Darshan, I know like the hypothetical question is, well, what happens when we hit a limit of African Americans? And that's not going to happen in a practical.
It just depends on how you set the study up. Is my point.
Yeah, well, they'll never be set up like that, and they're not even going to be set up to limit Caucasians. I've never heard that yet.
Well, not yet, but that's what we're talking about, right? What does the new diversity plan mean? How is this going to affect sites?
Well,
should
that would
sites
mean it's
be targeting the natural population, or should they be targeting a population that they should probably be hoping to sort of pull in?
They should be targeting their natural population.
But that's not what you said.
No, it is what I said, because so now we're getting into why different ethnic groups do research.
Okay.
Historically speaking, and there's people can do hour-long podcasts on African Americans with Tuskegee and the reasons why.
Absolutely.
For Hispanics, they're very distrustful of medicine in general.
Sure.
Caucasians, less of a problem. So I don't need to target Caucasians in my community to get them into studies. I need to make extra efforts to get Hispanics in my studies.
So let's pick on this. Should you target the Jewish population? I mean, they have.
We don't really have one.
No, you don't. But my point being, there's loads of history, for example, from the Nazi prison experiments that talk about the distrust of the population.
They probably should be.
So when do you not target a population? So it's just sort of your Anglo-Saxons you don't target?
Just that's the current. I mean, we target everyone, right? But we make extra efforts for the.
There you go. Kevin Gray has a great point. You need to target whites in rural areas. Do we now say, well, so only white Anglo-Saxons in the middle of a city in an urban environment?
Basically, that's the status quo. Look, we'll target everyone.
Sure.
We have hard.
No, when we say target, we're saying that everyone's allowed, but we're trying to recruit more from these other ethnic groups just so we can have.
I have an ad in the paper.
Yeah.
Not IRB approved. Come and get me, guys. Like, it's just very generic. We do a bunch of different studies. Here's the indications. Here's the QR code if you're interested. We have the same ad in Spanish.
Yeah.
So I'm targeting Hispanics and whites or Hispanics that speak English primarily, and anyone else that sees that ad. So we'll take anyone in these studies because the
So,
IE
so
criteria.
let's say your site
Mhm.
was in Edison, New Jersey. So you have an Indian
Sounds
population. That's the
competitive.
reason.
Sounds competitive.
No. The reason I was asking that question is so naturally speaking, you do tend to have a Hispanic population you can target, and you can do that with language, right? So you
Yeah.
pointed out that you had the ad in Spanish. You can use the English ad because, well, that makes sense, dude. You'll have a
But
large
interestingly
population.
enough, in a place like Yuma, you can get your Hispanic population numbers in English.
Oh, I'm sure you could,
Yeah.
but you went and put the Spanish one in there anyways.
Extra efforts.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
My question is, when you take that next step, and you went, do you spend the extra money to target the Indian population, or do you go? They'll have to come in through the English one.
We're working with a just Friday. While I was in the investigator meeting, I was checking emails when they're talking about IRT nonsense, and the big sponsor on a study told me, "Hey, we're actually trying to target Native Americans for this
Yeah,
study."
great. Let's pick that one. But Native
It's
Americans speak
literally
English.
what
That's
happened.
not really.
Yeah, so they said like, what kind of budget do you need, and how could we help you? This is a
Mhm.
very progressive sponsor. So hey, we would love access to those clinics in the Native American, like on the reservation.
Yeah,
Lunch and learns, of course. Yeah. So they want us to target Native Americans now because we're hitting our Hispanic and our Caucasian quotas,
yeah.
and we even got an Asian in there just from the newspaper ad.
I'm sorry. Did
And
you say got an Asian in there?
yeah, yeah, we got an Asian in there. Like they're probably what 2% of Yuma. We got one in there. Um, no Native Americans.
That as an Asian, I I'm gonna laugh at the comment. We got an Asian in there. I don't even know what that means. It's a really funny visual to me.
We
But
got we're hitting our numbers. Like
yeah,
we
that's
got
awesome. Yeah,
sponsors want more Native Americans across the board. They're like, hey, we have a few sites in Arizona. They have a bunch of Native Americans around there. Let's
yeah,
target them. I mean, it makes sense, right? You're not gonna target a place that doesn't have Native Americans, like a
sure.
community that doesn't. So yeah, so we're trying to make extra efforts to reach them. So common sense, man. I think a lot of this is like it's touchy subject because you have to treat we're all about equality in our country,
Hmm.
and then you actually have to use different strategies for different minority
Yeah,
groups, and they're
yeah.
not all equal in their sentiment towards research.
I agree. I think it also comes down to the idea that we've got to. It's one thing to espouse a progressive attitude and say we want diversity, but then you've got to put money down.
Yeah,
And that's when you start putting money down, you realize, okay, I have to make choices. And how do I make those choices? And how
right.
you make those choices will have a direct impact on what population you target, who's going to be in your audience, and you put your money in different ways. It might be in targeting the population, but you might, for example, just for argument's sake, say, I want to target the Hispanic population by hiring more Spanish speaking people,
Yep.
so you may
Literally
not
did
actually
that.
have any more ads.
Literally did that in my Indeed ad.
Right.
I need bilingual,
Yeah.
right? Like if you're not bilingual, well, you're still being considered, but it's really we prefer at this hire
Yeah.
bilingual candidate.
Not touching that one from a legal perspective, just to be clear. But
I'm sure there's like somebody that said that's wrong, but that's what we put. Like bilingual preferred.
right.
Yeah.
So, but I think where you put your money, where you put your dollars, is going to have a dramatic impact on what diversity looks like as we continue, and the question of what is diversity will be answered not just in the diversity plans that sponsors will create, but in the individual choices that sites make. So sites have a huge role to play in the context of clinical research and diversity as we move forward. And it's going to, sponsors will obviously have context and choice, but the actual day to day decisions will be based on sites like Yuma Clinical Trials.
I hope so, man. I think we need more sites in underserved communities. I think that long tail is going to get longer, and it's counterintuitive, counter to big pharma strategy of let's everything efficient, centralized. No, it's going to get messy. If you want diversity, it's going to get messy.
I mean, technically, Netflix did a good job with that, right? I mean, Netflix
Yeah.
made an entire business model out of just the long tail.
Every revolutionary technology does that.
Yeah.
Standard Oil did that. Why? Because kerosene before was not standardized. You didn't know what you were getting.
Oh, is that
Then they
true? I
standardized.
didn't
That
know
was the
that.
long tail. Yeah, that's how they started. That's why they're named Standard Oil. And then the pharma companies, so Squibb started out because they were making coloring for fabrics.
Okay.
Because prior to like chemical synthesis of like colors of dyes, you had to actually find like plants with those color. That's why purple was like only for royalty, because it was very rare to find purple. You had to go to
Yeah.
like a sea urchin or something.
Yeah.
So then Squibb came out as a dye company and said, "Hey, how can we bring like chemical synthesis to these drugs?" And then that's where they came out with like making I think it was ether for anesthesia. Like, how do we standardize this? And that was the long tail. That became pharma. So everything like this diversity is going to be the same thing. Like it's going to get messy. There's going to be a group there. Why are so many venture capital companies looking at sites like Yuma Clinical Trials to acquire, put into a group, and say, "Hey, pharma, we have sites all across the border and in all these minority communities.
I think
Choose us for your next study."
let's have a whole conversation that's separate on a different day on just M&A in clinical trial
Oh
sites.
man, yeah, that's a whole nother topic. But
Yeah.
you're right, man. It's always good to have these conversations because these are like what they should have discussed at that investigator meeting, and more people would have stayed instead of like going in the bathroom or making phone calls.
Well, I'm glad we actually had this conversation. I do need to go out soon, but it's
Yes.
one of those conversations that honestly we got more into the dirt and sort of got our hands dirty with what does that mean? What does diversity mean?
We need to. This is not a clean topic. This is a messy topic.
This is a messy topic. But I want to appreciate Kevin for contributing as much as he did.
Kelvin, you're the man, right? Like, we got to get you on the podcast. And then you, Uma, you too. Please, please, I'm going to message you right now. Darshan, anything you'd like to say to wrap up? Fraud Pod, you're a hardworking man.
Well, join me on Darshan Talks, which is my podcast. I talk about law and compliance in clinical research, but also all things pharma and FDA regulated companies. And if you need legal help, you can always find me on at the Kulkarni Law Firm, and I do work in just FDA regulated industries. And hopefully, I'm going to get a chance to talk to Dan more because we're going to be we're hopefully going to have another one on Fraud Pod, which is overdue.
What's another juicy one, man? We'll find
Dude,
something.
so much
The
there.
industry will give us. It's the gift that keeps on giving. They will give us something from above.
There's always I have so many topics, but I'm not even worried. We'll have that discussion.
Okay. Well, thank you.
John?
Everybody go follow
Yeah.
Darshan. Like, subscribe, comment, share. Go hit him up right now. Catch y'all later. Bye-bye.
Thanks, guys.